It's Romania Black, and you may be thinking, wow, Romania, last week you didn't talk very much about this series. Well, that's because I didn't even go into detail about Event Horizons or half the things I wanted to. It's Romania Black, and yeah. Mm-hmm. The berry one is weird. The berry one is weird, but you know what? The things we do for science, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We're on episode 7, as I adjust my camera. Episode 7 of Steins Gate, and yeah, Romania. I don't know if I was just not all together or if my brain melted and I became a Jill Nana myself, but I didn't really talk about Event Horizons much last week, or things that I have since then learned about, coincidentally through other shows on my channel that I think might pertain to this show. So we're gonna go back over Event Horizons. Do not worry. I'm probably gonna tell the Discord by this point, so do not worry. I've probably gotten a million comments about Event Horizons in the comments section by this point, but that's okay. So we're going forward in time. I gotta shift into Steins Gates mode. So I've got comments that we need to talk about. I also want to talk about the dub for episode 6. And then a couple of other things before we dive into episode 7. So that seems legitimate, right? Yes, of course. As far as the whole dream sequence back last episode, I didn't really talk a lot about it, but I thought about it during editing. I thought this is hearkening back to episode 1, where Okarin talks about time supposedly having no end itself, but humanity having an ending. And I was like, okay, so we're kind of circling back to that already in episode 6, which seems rather sooner than I expected, but it is what it is. So in the dub for episode 6, there were a couple, there weren't as many lines that I noted as I have previous episodes. I will say that the dub does point out that quote unquote no country has come forward to claim the offending object, aka the satellite, so that gives some in the dub some indication of why it's still there. When Okarin says he calls it in the dub Kioma's nostalgia drive, which is great, and J. Michael Tatum does a great job of doing that line. Immediately afterwards, when Kurisu is like, that's dumb, he's like, duly noted, temporary assistant. Which I love how he insists on calling her an assistant, but then the moment she says something that he doesn't like, he's like, temporary assistant, like I could eject you from this operation, which I don't think is happening at all. I think Kurisu has locked in and is getting obsessed with this whole time machine. The thing that she, said didn't exist and was impossible, I think Okarin might have created a monster, and that's a problem. So we'll see where that goes. We'll see where that goes. But yeah, the one thing I was disappointed in was that I loved the Yuri Field joke in episode 6. In the English dub, they don't really have a way of translating it. So Okarin calls Mayuri Princess Ow, and he's like, put the tea set away, Princess Ow. And so it didn't quite have the impact of the Yuri Field joke, although I will say one moment I kind of like more in the dub than the sub, even though I love Miyano Mamoru, don't get me wrong, is J. Michael Tatum does a great job of the voice acting of him freaking out in the grocery store, where he starts to kind of hyperventilate a little bit when he sees the green jello and realizes like it hits him what's going on. J. Michael Tatum did an amazing job of like just his breathiness in that moment where he was kind of like hyperventilating a little bit was really good. And then talking about, he's him being upset that Mayuri's involved, because he seems to have like, he's kind of, it seems like he's been placed as her caretaker. And so he feels some responsibility that she's caught up in all of this. I don't know. The voice actress that's doing Amane had some great, like, what's up, fellow kids, lines in the English dub of episode 6. My favorite was Amane's voice actor saying the phrase, and I quote, that's real crunk and all. In response to Okarin, I cannot. I'm going to say that's real crunk and all. Probably a lot in this series now, because Amane has opened up that Pandora's box and it will never be closed. And then in the dream sequence in the English dub, there is the phrase that's said by Kurisu's voice actress, eternity is not infinite and reality has a beginning and an end, which does somewhat tie into what Okarin said at the beginning of the series, so we'll see where that goes. And FB still has no explanation. In the dub, Okarin and Moika kind of look at each other and they have an understanding, but we, the audience, have no freaking clue what that understanding is. So, unless I've missed something, and if so, the show will come back and tell me about it, I'm sure. We'll just have to see. H-Banana7 says back for episode 3, the only shining finger, quote unquote, that they know is from G Gundam. I've not seen that. It's the main character's attack move. Funnily enough, he is voiced by Daru's voice actor, Seki Tomokazu. Interesting. And it's funny Kurisu is from the States because of the time zones. Yeah, that's hilarious. Yep, the differing time zones. Funny that. So that's cool. That, I guess, the shining finger, that makes sense if it's calling back to G Gundam. Sure. Bestial Moon for episode 3 says, I do want to bring up something I like about the dub. While the sub is making sure that Hoen Kyoma's jokes get across, it does feel a bit like, and that theory is bunk, conversation enter every time it cuts back. Meanwhile, the dub not only has the Doctor Who reference, but also brings up string theory and Godel, making it a bit more scientific. I think it comes down to a matter of preference in the end, though I do heartily agree as a reactor, you should watch the sub first. Yeah, I think that as far as, because I do have some people that get very, I don't want to say aggressive, but they're just like, you should watch the dub. You should watch the dub. I'm not watching you if you're not watching the dub. And I'm like, okay. But I think as a reactor, it's important to watch the sub to get that initial translation across of what's being said. But with that being said as well, I'm glad I'm going back through and watching the dub before. It's a nice recap because honestly, I can be getting stuff ready and getting my Dr. Pepper out of the fridge and listen to the dub, and then I can pause it and then go right down a line if I'm like, oh, I really thought that was funny. And it gets my brain kind of in the mood for Steins Gate before I even sit down here to record a new episode. So I like going back and watching the dub. I think it's great. And it's my ritual now that I will sit down or be walking around listening to the dub right before I sit down to record this episode that comes after. So it's a nice little like recap before you get into it. So, but thank you, Bestial Moon. Vacant says for episode 3, a linguistic note. In English, a brawn tube would be some specific type of early CRT, but in Japanese CRTs in general, they're just commonly called brawn tubes or broncon. So I'll also note that while Okarin calls the landlord Mr. Braun, the landlord himself claims to have some other name, which I've forgotten. Okarin is basically just calling him Mr. CRT. Which, you know what? I like calling him Braun because it's easy to say, it's easy to remember, and it's a little play on words. But that 1000% makes sense that Okarin just gave him a name. Like he calls everybody 004 and now we have 005. But him calling him just Mr. CRT just because I'm sure that Amane, either Amane or Ferris are going to become 006 and 007. If Amane becomes 007 and they're actually a spy from the future, that would be incredible. That would be incredible. This series has my tinfoil hat on all the time. Would be incredible. That would make, you'd have to have Ferris or Ruka be 006. And then, or either Amane needs to be 007 because they're possibly a spy, or 2, they need to be 008 tying to the time machine. We'll see. We'll see what happens. And then Armin, for episode 3 says the phone and the visual novel. Now, I did check with the mods. The mods did ask about visual novel information. I'm like, okay, my explanation about the visual novel is if this information will never come up in the show, Steins Gate or Steins Gate Zero or the OVA movie, whatever else is included, if it will never come up again, I'm okay with knowing about it. But if it's going to be something I'm going to find out later on, even if it's months down the road, I don't want to know about it right now. So with that being said, they did approve this comment. So the phone in the visual novel is interactive. So you can read all texts that Okarin receives fully and reply to some in which you get different facts or new wallpapers for phones or ringtones that you can use. Well, that's just cool. Oh, I'm missing out on all things from the visual novel. That's my completionist in me is like, but I need to know. So we'll see. I'm sure somebody somewhere in the internet has compiled all the different responses into a document somewhere in the interwebs. So maybe one day when I finish this season, I'll be able to go find that. We'll see. Interesting. About Ryenet sausages. Ryenet is a popular made-up franchise, which you can learn more in the visual novel if you interact a lot with Ferris, Mayuri, and Ruka, or Lukaku, on the phone, since they are into it a lot. Okay, so apparently Ruka knows about Ryenet as well. We'll just make note of that. We'll take a little note of that. It's a shonen anime, and Upa is a mascot. You can also get different episode summaries on the phone. Okay, well, Upa being a mascot for Ryenet makes a lot of sense because Mayuri was really into Upa, so those two things being connected would make a lot of sense. Even though, you know, of course, Mayuri can have interests that are for more than one series. Anthony on the Discord for episode 4 said the first maid cafe opened in Akibara, where the show takes place, in 2001. So, all these things happening in 2001 near Akibara, funny that. Everything's connected. So, that was awesome. I love that. And then, okay, I'm going to talk about Event Horizon and a couple other things that I have discovered on my own time since watching episode 6. We're going to do that once we get to the discussion, because I've already spent over 10 minutes talking to you all, and I want to get into episode 7. But I will say, Moomin, who is a fellow patron, they're watching my series reactions I'm doing for Orb on the movements of the Earth, which is on the channel right now as well. If you want to go check that series out, I started it like within the same week as Steins Gate. But Moomin was commenting for episode 1 of that series and mentioned the idea of a block universe. And while I was reading their comment, I was like, I need to talk about this with Steins Gate. So it seems like it's going to be relevant to Steins Gate. So here's this is not going to reveal anything about Orb. It's just about block universe theory. So this will have nothing to do with Orb. So don't worry about that. But it says, as a kid, I thought of a block universe as a loaf of bread. It has slices which represent time. It has a beginning, the past, and you can take those slices out and look at them or experience them. It also has an end, the future, and you can take them out and look at them. As a whole, it is a loaf of bread, and all the slices exist at the same time. So, both the past and the future exist at once. That is a block universe. This is also the same excuse that my husband uses when something happens, and it's always going to happen because it already did. I was just like, wait, Steins Gate, we need to apply this right now. So I was like instantly like copying and pasting over. So yeah, so it does kind of feel really cool, this idea of the block universe, and that it's kind of tying back to how time travel kind of works as well, because if you think about it, the stuff, them sending the text in the past is happening, but as it's going back in the past, it's already happened. So we're just gonna, so yeah, just let your mind wrap around that this stuff's already happening, because I'm like, oh my God. But yeah. So thank you all for the comments. I'm sorry that's taken 13 minutes to get through. I still have more things to talk about, but we need to wait until we get through episode 7 before we do it. So yeah. I wait for one episode's comments to come in, and now it's like suddenly everything's changing. So anyway, I hope you all are excited. I am as well. We're going to sit down, watch episode 7 of Steins Gate, and just see what we get. So thank you all for your comments and kind words. We're going to get this shindig going here in 3, 2, 1, and I'll see you all on the other side. I'm going to have a migraine by the time this is over. Okay. So, this is, I feel like this episode felt like kind of an experience. And then when I was starting to look at things that I wanted to talk to you all about in the discussion, I felt like I was having an out-of-world experience. And I'm not even joking with you all. We're going to talk about this, but the timelines, world lines are colliding in ways that are kind of scary. Y'all. So let's dive into this. So, we're going to talk a little bit about chaos theory. on the backboard here, and that's gonna make sense in a minute. Whoa! We're gonna talk about it, but I want to talk about Event Horizons from last week's episode before we dive into the madness that's this week. Oh, buddy. So Event Horizon was mentioned by Okarin in last week's episode when he was having the dream, and Kurusu's voice actress was telling us about eternity and reality and things having definitive ends and beginnings and things. And so an Event Horizon, if you don't know what that is, I know most of you are probably thinking of like an early 2000s movie, which did come out like a sci-fi movie, Event Horizon. But I'm not talking about the movie. We're talking about the astrophysics phenomenon. So an event horizon is a boundary beyond which events cannot affect an outside observer. Wolfgang Rindler coined the term in the 1950s. So in 1784, John Mitchell proposed that gravity can be strong enough in the vicinity of massive compact objects that even light cannot escape. At the time, Newtonian theory of gravitation and the so-called corpuscular theory of light were dominant. And it goes on to talk about that. In 1958, David Finkelstein used general relativity to introduce a stricter definition of a local black hole event horizon as a boundary beyond which events of any kind can affect an outside observer, leading to information and firewall paradoxes, encouraging the reexamination of the concept of local event horizons and the notion of black holes. Several theories were subsequently developed, some with and some without event horizons. One of the leading developers of theories to describe black holes, Stephen Hawking, suggested that an apparent horizon should be used instead of an event horizon, saying gravitational collapse produces apparent horizons but no event horizons. He eventually concluded the absence of event horizons means there are no black holes, in the sense of regimes from which light cannot escape to infinity. Which I feel like the discussion of holding your hand up to the sun, Mayuri, all of this, Mayuri and Okarin doing similar things with their hands in their kind of ties to that in the series. But it says any object approaching the horizon from the observer's side appears to slow down, never quite crossing the horizon. Due to the gravitational redshift, its image reddens over time as the object moves closer to the horizon. In an expanding universe, the speed of expansion reaches and even exceeds the speed of light, preventing signals from traveling to some regions. A cosmic event horizon is a real event horizon because it affects all kinds of signals, including gravitational waves, which travel at the speed of light. And then they have a whole bunch of different kind of event horizons. There are formulas here that I don't understand at all. But it talks about apparent horizon of an accelerated particle or hyperbolic motion or relativity. If a particle is moving at a constant velocity in a non-expanding universe free of gravitational fields, any event that occurs in that universe will eventually be observable by the particle because the forward light cones from these events intersect the particle's world line. On the other hand, if the particle is accelerating in some situations, light cones from other events never intersect that particle's world lines. Under these conditions, an apparent horizon is present because the particle's accelerating reference frame representing the boundary beyond events is unobservable. What I'm trying to get in this, and I'm not going to read the whole wiki article to you all because we've talked about black holes, things like that, is Okarin an event horizon in himself? Is he capable of seeing events as an outsider without being affected by the shifting and changing world lines? Maybe. So we're going to put Okarin up here, and Okarin as a possible event horizon or connected to. Because the whole thing about him being the Messiah, I'm like, let's feed into his ego and start this whole chosen one narrative, shall we? That's going to get crazy. But I feel like the whole event horizon thing would help explain why Okarin is able to interact with all the different world lines changing in front of him as an observer without being affected with his memories as everyone else is. So we're going to start with that. And get into this. But so I want to talk about chaos theory, but I want to talk about it once we get into the real nitty gritty of this, because my mind is still exploding from the coincidences in my own timeline in real life talking to you all. So holy shit, we're going to get into this. But this episode starts on August 3rd at 1300 hours, 1324, which is 1 is basically 1:24 p.m. So I'm going to change this up here. So essentially, which, God, when we talk about this, it's going to make everything crazy and have no rules. But okay, so episode 6 ended. I went back and looked it up. Episode 6 ended at 9:14 a.m. That was around the time that Okarin got up. It felt like we're documenting this day because it is important. This is the divergent singularity happens here. So we need to note that he woke up at 9:14 a.m. The episode started at nearly 1:30 p.m. when everyone gathered and we had all the things and we decided to form our plan, right? That's where we started with. And God, the way they start this episode out, shiver my right hand. By the contract we made, I order you to wreath yourself in black flame and grant my desire. If ever there was an ominous way to open up an episode, this was it. Like, Miyano Mamoru acted the hell out of it, but it's like, oh my God. So this is like, we're making deals with devils. We've decided to go back into the past and change the past, but it's not going to change the past. But oh my God. So yeah, great start to this episode. And then we even had the Bungo Stray Dogs fish bowl eyes moment. Had all of that. But this is the moment that changes everything. It's when he takes the door off of the microwave. So she's like, well, now I can't heat up my karaage. And he's like, no, it's no longer a microwave, Mayuri, it's a time machine. And then Kurisu's like, if you join the lab, you're going to be dealing with this all day. I am still amazed beyond all disbelief that they just, I'm kind of amazed at this point that they just let Moeka in and let her join the group knowing not a damn thing about her. Not one thing about her. Nothing. And honestly, and I know this is going to be like, Romania, are you talking about women and sexism again? And I'm going to be like, yeah, kind of. Because I feel like they think she's not a threat because she's a pretty girl. I think they think because she's quiet and she's pretty, they're like, what's the worst that she can do? I don't think we should underestimate Moeka. I just honestly do not think we should underestimate her. And I could understand Okarin letting her in because man is Delulu out the wazoo. Like, he is just completely delusional and is like, yep, we can trust 005 with everything. And we're like, you don't even know anything about her past her name. Not one thing. So I understand Okarin being delusional. That makes sense. Ties to his character, whatever. Mayuri trusts everyone and everything. She is the most purest being that wants world peace, and I'm now terrified for her life, but we'll talk about that later. Daru just thinks of her as a hot woman that's not a threat because she's hot, probably. And so there's that. But I'm surprised by Kurisu, because Kurisu is like, yeah, sure, just join the group. But maybe she's as delusional as he is. Maybe she's as delusional as Okarin. You know? So I don't find Moeka as threatening as Amane still. I feel like Amane is definitely from the future. Amane is from the dystopian future. I don't know if that's true or not. We'll find out. Or she's been raised in a cult and she just got out of an underground bunker recently and found her way here. But Moeka, we know nothing about her. And this time machine, even though it's all fun and games now, like, haha, we made a time machine, is kind of a legit threat now that you've proven it can send text back in the past. That's like, the government could come find you and confiscate that and you all could get in some deep shit. So just telling this random girl about it that you don't even know is so crazy to me. So crazy to me. And I know it's like shonen logic, but I'm like, that seems like it could go very poorly. And she's like, you need to buy me a new microwave, Okarin. And I love when he goes, sorry, I don't have the money. And then he says not to photograph. So we don't know what FB means. We've abandoned the plot with that. Maybe we'll find out eventually. Maybe he was just making shit up to get her to join and just playing off of what he thinks she would react to. Who knows? Maybe we'll find out. We'll see. But he asks her not to photograph, and she's like, well, you looked happy. She's like, it's to celebrate. So they basically decide what they're going to do. They're going to take the microwave door off and use it as a time machine. And they're like, don't you think the landlord's going to get mad at us? And so he wants to make sure the landlord's not there before they do any more experimenting. So Okarin goes downstairs. We get to meet Nye, which is basically Braun's daughter. With her pigtails. I could see why Okarin called her a squirrel, but still. We're going to talk about the scene where Braun came back. I was a little worried for a second, and I was like, are we having a fake out moment? And we did. But anyway, so Amane's cleaning up her bike while talking to Nye, and he's like, part-time warrior. And he's like, and the window is open, right? And she's like, oh, hey. He's like, Mayuri, be quiet. He's like, where is Mr. Braun? And she's like, oh, who's that? Okay, don't call my dad Mr. Braun. Now that all makes sense because it's a nickname. It's not her dad's actual name. And he's like, oh, you mean the boss? He's out on a call. And then he's like, oh, is that true? And he immediately runs back. Now, they start the experiments with the microwave and all the electricity and everything and sending the text back and forth, and it works without blowing stuff up. So they're able now, we've made very quick, rapid success at doing the time machine moment, exposing them all to radiation, but that's fine, without destroying the lab. So progress. So that means they might be able to do it without Braun getting mad. And then it says the mail was sent back to 1343, 5 days earlier. From Mayuri. Okay. And then Moeka is like, this is a time machine. And Amane, as nice, like I saw a light, Amane looks like she has a 1,000-yard stare and shit is going down. I don't trust Moeka and Amane. I still find Amane is more of a local threat and Moeka is like a late game threat, but we'll see with that. So Amane, things about Amane that were weird this episode. The 1,000-yard stare after the experiment. Her opening up and offering an ear to Okarin. Because to me, I feel like she's trying to get information. She's heard and eavesdropped on a lot, but I think she's trying to get in the fold now that she knows what they're doing. And is like, yeah, I could be, 006, 007, wink, wink. So we'll see where that goes. And also the whole brainwashing and the chip. The brainwashing and the chip, I'm like, okay, are you from a dystopian future where they have chips in people's heads that brainwash them to think certain things? Don't know. But anyway, so let's get past this OP. The episode's called Divergence Singularity. So yeah, so they bring back God, that Dr. Pepper scene was the best part of the episode. So they bring back all the stuff here, and I want to make note of what's on the table, because you have to note everything in this series now. So he looks around, and he's like, there's no Dr. Pepper. And she's like, they were out. And he's like, well then look, basically... Okarin's like the people that are obsessed with Alani's right now trying to find the witch's brew. He's like, you just keep looking in the stores till you find it. He's like, that's what it means to be a Dr. Pepperian. A Dr. Pepperian. As a connoisseur of Dr. Pepper, I understand the struggles of the Dr. Pepperian. So I want to make note of what was on that table there and to see if it was different. They're like, well, they didn't have any. What do you want me to do about it? Do you want some or not? And honestly, Okarin's reaction to the vegetable juice would be my reaction to the vegetable juice. At least it looks like carrot juice, or the vegetable juice. This is the weirdest thing, but in the US, the vegetable juice that's orange, I can drink because it's more like sweet and usually has carrots or fruitiness in it. The tomato juice, oh, hell no. V8, no. We ain't gonna have no sponsorship from them anytime soon. Nope. He's like, geez. He's like, what kind of mad scientist worries about not getting enough vegetables? Freaking love it. Instead of the intellectual drink of choice. So we're going to go back at some point to see what was on that table. Now, Daru opens the window and he's like, well, what if the organization discovers our secret? But Mayuri was hanging out the window earlier. So did they shut it and then they opened it again? And he's like, delusion fail. I honestly... In all of this, Moeka's sitting there taking pictures, texting, not saying a damn word. being incognito, I'm like, and none of y'all are remotely concerned. Nobody's concerned about this. Okay, fine. Fine. You just let the audience be paranoid on your behalf because that's what we are. I'm like, y'all have been hacking into government documents and into a government system. I would be a little bit concerned about this organization. And I can't believe I'm saying that because it makes Okarin look competent. And like he knows what he's talking about. It's like, the more the series goes on. But you know what? If he's able to see in various timelines and piece things together because his memories aren't altered, that could make him look smarter than everybody else. And like he knows more of what's going on. So by design, he'll seem more knowledgeable just because he's not being affected by all this. Oh my God. Anyway, so the barley tea is interesting. I know in Japan they drink a lot of barley tea. I think of the Digimon movie when I think of barley tea. I have no clue what barley tea tastes like, but I don't know what barley tastes like, so I'm curious. But yeah, so he's like, what should we do? So he's like, we're going to get a lottery number. And I was like, Okarin, that seems like a terrible idea. So, okay, on the container there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 containers because there's 5 of them. So 5 drinks. We know that one is the vegetable juice. And there's 1 bag of chips in that world line. So yeah, so he's like, let's get a lottery ticket. And then they talk about creating a time paradox, which if you don't know what a time paradox is, I'm not looking up the AI overview because I'm a real researcher. I'm going to Wikipedia, damn it. So a temporal paradox or time paradox or the time traveler paradox is an apparent or actual contradiction associated with the idea of time travel or the foreknowledge of the future. Temporal paradoxes arise from circumstances involving hypothetical time travel to the past. They are employed to demonstrate the impossibility of time travel, which would make sense why Kurisu brings them up. They fall into 3 broad groups, which we're going to talk about the number 3. Oh my God, the number 3 is crazy in this. The number 3 is crazy. Okay, so there is the bootstrap paradox. There is consistency paradoxes, and then there is the free will causality exemplified by the Newcomb paradox. So we'll say the free will causality. I'm thinking that's more like an Oedipus complex paradox, but we'll see. So there's a causal loop where it talks like a causal loop is also known as a bootstrap paradox. So it basically talks about how if you have the bootstrap one, we're going to put it right here. If you had a pool table ball, right, that was here, and then you hit the ball moving forward, or you hit the ball into another ball, and then it moved this direction, right? Well, if you timed, and then the ball ends up over here. If you time travel back to the part where the ball is hit, and you alter something, then it's going to change the trajectory of it, right? So it says backward time travel would allow information, people, or objects whose histories seem to come from nowhere. It's basically an information loop, information paradox, where any event, such as an action, information, or object, or a person ultimately causes itself as a consequence of retrocausality or time travel. It appears to violate causality by allowing future events to influence the past and cause themselves, known as bootstrapping, which derives from the idiom to pull oneself up by their own bootstraps. So basically, you're creating your own history, essentially, is what that amounts. You're creating a time loop where you create your own history, which is not what's happening in the show, right? So it's not the bootstrap one. Then there is the consistency paradox or the grandfather paradox, in which the past is changed in any way. So the consistency paradox is where basically a time traveler can do anything that did happen, but cannot do anything that did not happen. So a lot of time travel shows will kind of go with the consistency paradox that I've noticed, where it's like, oh, if you go back in time and you change one thing, it could cause something to change. But as long as you don't change, basically, if you've watched Link Click, the premise at the onset is kind of tied to the consistency paradox. Now, whether it stays with that, you gotta go watch the show and find out yourself. But it starts out kind of with the premise of the consistency paradox. Anyway, then there is free will and causality, which is a thought experiment that shows that apparent contradictions between unexpected utility principles and strategic dominance. It's basically exploring causality and free will. I think of it as kind of, which, you know what? Oedipus would actually probably be more of a bootstrap paradox because Oedipus kind of causes his own future. Anyway, but it says allowing for perfect predictors. If time travel exists as a mechanism for making perfect predictions by allowing true knowledge of the future, the perfect predictions appear to contradict free will because decisions apparently made with free will were already known to the perfect predictor, meaning the choice apparently made with free will was already made. The only thing I will say about free will and causality is it makes me think of Berserk. It makes me think of Berserk, and that's all I can say about that. So if you watch Berserk, you may understand that. But what I'm about to tell you here in about 5 minutes will make all of this irrelevant. We'll make what Kurisu is talking about with paradoxes absolutely irrelevant. So those last 5 minutes were just to explain what Kurisu is talking about in creating a time paradox, because I don't think that exists in this world based on what we're about to talk about. Don't think that's going to be a thing. So anyway, he's like, aren't you interested in whether we can alter the past using the D-mail? What's fascinating is that Okarin gets these moments where he does in fact become a mad scientist, where he's like, what if we changed the past? What if we did this? Where's your scientific curiosity? And then almost like a light switch flips. He has a moment of realization after the fact where he's like, why would I think that? Oh my God, the ramifications of that. But he usually only finds that out in hindsight and later. So it's like, ugh. Which, like when he was in the grocery store last episode and was like, oh my God. He's like, what will he change? Good question. He's like, I want to accomplish in this opposite operation is to win the lottery. Now, Kurisu is like, that's lame. And Daru's like, I'm in. I can go to the May Queen all I want and buy a new computer and do all this. Like, just, it's in this moment you realize they are still, like, college students. There are early, like, they're kids. They're kids. They may look like full-grown adults, but they are kids, essentially. Because Daru was like, oh, I'll use the money to buy a new computer and all this. And I'm like, you're changing the past. You're changing and altering time. And I love that Mayuri's like, we should work towards world peace. She's an angel. When she said that, I was like, oh my God, Mayuri's too good for this world. Something bad's going to happen to her. And I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but in that moment, I was like, ooh. And last episode, when Okarin was like, I've drugged Mayuri into this, I'm like, Mayuri is like Okarin's like emotional, moral anchor. And I'm like, as long as something doesn't happen to Mayuri, I think Okarin can always be dialed back in. But if something happens to her, we're in trouble. We're in a lot of trouble. But we'll see where that goes. She's like, we could give everyone in the world a new book cushion. I mean, that would be great. He's like, it's an experiment to see if we can change the past. This would be the easiest way to tell. But also Kurisu's like, you just want money. There are other ways to do this. He calls her Celeb 17. The reasoning behind it, God, the animation of him being like, Celeb 17, like the reasoning behind it is hilarious, where he basically calls her out for being a Nepo baby. And I'm like, ha! And she's like, I'm actually 18. So I'm like, well, basically instead of Android 17, you're Android 18. You can call that an upgrade if you want. But yeah, he's like, I don't want to hear anything from a woman who is in a hotel living off her parents' money. And I'm like, damn, sir. He's like, I live off the money of everyone else around me. Not my parents. So that's a fun time. Anyway, so Moeka just disappears. And then we find out she's trying to take the IBM computer. And he's like, I can't take my eyes off for a second. She's like, well, you didn't respond. And says, I really want to borrow the IBM 5100, please. It's okay, right? And he's like, no. I like his eyebrow twitching. And then Daru says, is she supposed to be like a Valley girl? Lol. And he's like, we're going to stick her in between Mayuri and Kurisu. And he's like, Christina. I like he either calls her 004 or Christina. Keep an eye on her. To be fair, Moeka is like herding a damn cat. So I don't blame them. But I'm very curious. Okay, now we see on the table okay, that's not what we have here. It's not 4 drinks. We're going to go back to this. So we have, I'm going to alter this here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 drinks. We have 1 Pringles, because that's basically the brand. 1 milk bread. And then we have a bag of chips. So that's what's on the table. Okay. But yeah, but in this moment, I'm curious what the deal is with Mayuri when she touches Moika's hand and puts it there. Like, Moika, you know, has a reaction to that. I don't know if Moika is Moika from the same timeline as Amane? Are they working together? Are they not used to social interaction from nice people? I don't know. We're going to have to find out. But yeah, so when they look up the lottery tickets, again, I like that Okarin immediately is like, oh no, 200 million yen is far too noticeable. We need to go smaller. I do appreciate that Okarin is really not in reality driven by greed. It's kind of more of a surface level greed because he wants to fund his experiments. But when push comes to shove, he's not really in it for the money. He's in it because he's a scientist and this sounds like a good idea and what a scientist would do. But he's not going to go out there and try to win $200 million because that'd be too noticeable. Be too loud. So they settle on the third prize, which is 70,000 yen. And they call him a chicken for it. Meanwhile, Mayuri's like, whenever you're tired or feeling down, you give Upa a hug like this. And honestly, Moika looks like she would give that thing a hug 24/7. So I don't know what to make with that. I was like, oh no, poor Moika. And she's like, and this is the fridge. And she's like, what's inside today? And there's like 2 things. And then, so she gets pictures of Mayuri by the refrigerator. And then by the fridge, by the TV. Interesting. And then by the teapot. I wonder if the TV photo, since it shows a reflection of Moika, if that's going to come into play in the future. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, the tea kettle, then the karage. Oh, the karage is included too. So we're going to put that on there. Yep. We're going to put that on there too. And then shows Mayuri the photographs. Okay. So then she's like, shining finger. Here is your first lab member mission. And he's like, oh, it's your first job. Think of what to write in the D-mail. Something that will make the me of 1 week ago buy a Lotto 6 ticket. So yeah, so 7 days ago would be 168 hours. So let's do 170 seconds. Okay. And so it's buy Lotto 6, you'll win. So the numbers that are on there for the Lotto 6, we're going to put this, are 0212193435337 are the numbers. Okay. Those don't mean anything offhand. They're just numbers. And so then it's literally Moika sending it back to them in the past. And he's like, at last the time has come to open Steins Gate. Oh! Well, here's the thing. We have opened Steins Gate. That's the crazy part. I think we have. Except opening the gate does something I don't think Okarin realizes it's doing. And it's like, oh my god. Okay. So, what ends up happening is he's like, you need to stop whining about it every time. And she's like, oh, you two look like you were having fun. And I like that. I agree with Daru. Kurisu is definitely a tsundere. Kurisu is a tsundere, like 100%. Absolutely. And so then they go, and I like Okarin studying her expression. I'm like, Okarin is the most oblivious person to Kurisu liking him. The most oblivious. But yeah. And so they start up the microwave. And I do love this moment where he is contemplating sending the message. Because once you do this, there's no going back. Once you do this, you've sent a message into the past that could have effects that will alter time. And he's like, that's too dangerous if you create a time paradox. Well, it's not a paradox you're creating, my friend, but it is going to do something. He's like, why am I so scared? Well, because you're altering time and space and potentially changing millions of lives. You know, just little things like that. And he's like, El Psi Congru. Okay. Here's the checkpoint, El Psi Congru. And then when he says, okay, that's when we go back. To the time. Yep. Ho, 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 from the microwave. And for a split moment that he thinks is minutes when it's only 30 seconds, he's standing there looking up at the light, and then gets called back to a reality that is different. That is different. A very different reality. Oh my God. Like, are you okay? And he's like, well, what was that? And so then he looks at his phone and the microwave. How many minutes have I been standing there? She's like, oh no, 30 seconds. And so they lay out what exactly happened. And they're like, you don't remember. So we were talking about an experiment to see if we could change the past with a D-mail. And then you ran over to Microwave Chan, to phone Microwave Chan. Oh my God, Myri. And started panting. Daru, don't ask her to say panting again. Damn it, I missed that. So, in this world line, he ran to the microwave because he remembered past actions. So back in the earlier episodes, when he was talking about there being a lecture and then suddenly there wasn't anymore. Same. And then when they went to go check out the satellite and everything, and he was struggling to remember, like, how did we get here? Same. Yep. So then he goes back to the center. Now, there was an animation error, like, right when it first goes back to them looking at him and he's from the microwave. There was an animation error because there was nothing on the table when you first looked back. But now we're back to it. He looks over. We're going to talk about this. Like, he's going to get a drink. Because then he looks back and says, it's here. The lottery ticket where he sent it to the past. So, if it was sent to the past and he found it, but he can also see the original text message, that means there was another world line version of him that sent it back. In this, it is kind of creating a little bit of a bootstrap bootstrap paradox, because it's confirming that a future him sent the message back. But he's in this zone, in this dimension. What? So I'm getting to this chaos stuff. Don't worry. We're almost there. He's like, are you really all right? And he's like, cell 7, did I win third prize? And she's like, I'm not cell 7. What are you talking about? And he's like, what do you mean? And they're like, Okarin. And he's like, the experiment. We did the experiment to see if we could change the past with the D-mail. It's like, we were just talking about what we could do for the experiment. And it's like, well, something that'll bring about world peace. I honestly, knowing what we know now, I don't blame Okarin for going insane, because this is nuts. This is crazy talk. No wonder he's like flipping out, like giving everyone an Oopa cushion. He's like, you guys don't remember. And I like Myri's little innocent, like, blink, blink. Like, and then, so then Ruka shows up. Ruka-chan looking, I mean, adorable, but also really ominous. I was like, did someone, when they showed up in black, I thought someone had died. I thought that, like, their dad or something bad had happened to him. Like, I thought we were going to have a butterfly effect situation where them sending the text to the past for the lottery ticket caused something bad to happen to Ruka's dad. Thank God, not the case. But Ruka shows up in very fashion forward outfit for 2010. I love the red capris. I love everything non-binary about what Ruka is wearing. The red, like, cargo Bermuda shorts, the chain, like for a chain wallet, the black sleeves with the black shirt with the puffy sleeves and the lace up back, the, like, necktie. Love it. Love it. What a fashionista. Ruka, ahead of their time. And they're like, I'm sorry. And then they said, here's this. But they look at the numbers. The numbers are not the same. It's the same, but it's like, where did you get this? So they call it Rukako. And they're like, you gave me the numbers. But here's the thing. He's like, I did. You said to buy it since it might win. And they're like, when? A week ago. And they're like, wow, Okarin's psychic. No, not psychic, but here's the crazy part, right? Here's the crazy part. So if we're thinking of this as a timeline, which again, we're going to get into all this. I cannot wait to get into all this, y'all. You know, I don't even understand. Okay. So right now we had Okarin, and I'm going to put Okarin Prime here. We had Okarin Prime that, let's say there's Okarin 2. So Okarin 2 sent the text back to Ruka to get the lotto numbers, but they were 1 off. Now, I thought about it since some of the text messages have been sent in like different segments, if that had something to do with it, but it didn't. It was just a little bit messed up. And then they came to the timeline where current Okarin 1 is to tell him about it, right? But this Okarin is not the one who sent Ruka the message. It was another version, because this original Okarin, y'all know what I mean. They sent the message back to, or they didn't even send the text. In that timeline, in the timeline that we had before everything was activated, this one told Moeka to send the text. We're going to put P1 over here. To send the text message back to them a week ago. So we had 2 different recipients of the text. In Okarin's initial timeline or world line that we started this episode with, they told Moeka to send the text back to him in the past. And he has the phone which shows the text that was sent back to the past. But in the world line that they are currently standing in, and maybe that's why he can see it, because he's in another world line. In this world line, the Okarin of that one sent the message back to Ruka instead of Moeka sending it back to him. And now Ruka's showing up to give the lotto ticket to him. So back when we were talking about John Titor's theory about, you know, the world line splitting up and everybody's memories being altered based on the new world line that they're a part of, Okarin is this kind of event horizon that is not affected by those memories being altered and by the world lines changing. But also Okarin seems to be somebody that might be present in multiple world lines, because they were there when they saw Kurisu get killed in the one world line, right? Is the satellite that has, I wonder, because Okarin has seen the satellite from the top of the roof when it crashed, I'm wondering if the satellite is allowing Okarin to be able to move within the different world lines successfully or not. I don't know if that's if that has anything to do with anything, but it could be something on there. And they're like, Ruka, did you win? And they're like, I got one of the numbers wrong. And then Okarin's like, but wait, what? So it was 02 in this world line. It was 02, 12, 18. 18. 3, 4, 5. Yep. So it was so close. The 9 and the 8 in the middle were altered. And that's why they didn't win. And they're like, too close. Uh-huh. And they're like, did you use the phone microwave? And he's like, yes, I did. And that's when he looks over and sees on the table, we see there's a big thing of barley tea. There's the Pringles. There's the everything is the same. But instead of the vegetable juice, there's a damn Dr. Pepper. It's a different world line. It's different. It's changed. And in this world line, here's where it gets crazy. In this world line, right now, it's 15. Okay, so in this world line is now 3:11 p.m. Has 2 hours really passed since the start of this episode? No, I don't think so. I think it's just a different time. Okay, well now, maybe not. Maybe, okay, this might be the future, actually, since he's finished the Dr. Pepper at the point where he's up on the rooftop, right? He's like, I sent the D-mail, but there's no record of it. Has the past been changed? No, I don't think the past has been changed. They don't remember the experiment. even though we all talked about it and we all observed it. Only I remember. And then he goes back to where he saw it back in episode 1. It's a feeling just like back then. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. What is this? And he's on the rooftop thinking about it. Yeah. So, okay, I don't know if what Amane has is like, if the little medal Amane has, it looks now like, okay, it looks like it's an O. Now we can see it a little bit better. It looks like kind of a clock. It looks like an O that has like an arrow, but the arrows are the points of the hands of a clock. I don't know. If you told me she was a time traveler, I would believe you. I would believe you. Because when Okarin comes out and says he might be brainwashed, she checks his eyes. But his eyes, you know, don't look like they have anything in them. And she's like, oh, good, you don't have a microchip. And he's like, what chip? Now, Nye is scared of Okabe just because he's kind of weird. And I don't blame a little kid for being scared of him. But then she makes the thing. So basically, Okarin opens up to Amane. And again, for someone that's worried about the organization, this supposed organization finding you out, but yet you know zilch, zero, nada about Amane and even less about Moika, except surface level, just rando things. You're trusting them with information about a time machine? Okay. I mean, in fairness, Amane overheard everything. So, okay. That's fine. And then you can hear, he's like, God, everybody could hear everything we could say. He's like, did you hear about the time machine? She's like, yeah, nice job, I guess. She's like, are you worried about something related to the time machine? Why not ask John Titor? Again, her connection to him is crazy. And then he's like, yeah, he mentioned something about this. If you go to the past and change it, it alters something called the divergence number. And the world line moves to another world. When there's a world line move, people's memories are altered. It feels like Okarin is the dot in this diagram, that Okarin is moving from world line to world line, where everybody's memories are different, and he just doesn't know how he's able to do it. Somehow Steins Gate is letting him move from world line to world line in ways that we can't explain right now. From a world where Rukaku didn't buy the Lotto 6 ticket to one where he did. And so the world line changed, and so did the past. In this world, I didn't send the email with the winning lotto number into the past. It's not that the other lab members don't remember it, it's that it didn't happen in this world line. So why do I remember? That's the golden question. Now, John Titor feeding Okarin into the idea of being a messiah when you don't even know this guy. I mean, stranger things have happened on the internet. But I'm just like, oh my God. So anyway, in this, Amane's like, hey, you can count on me. I'll always be on your side. And I'm like, girl, I don't even know. Says, I'm on your side, okay? I'm like, I want to trust Amane. I do. I don't. But I want to trust Amane. Now, when old Mr. Braun comes back, I'm not going to lie to y'all. Here's what I think is going to be the kicker, is we've had this happen in episode 1, where Okarin witnessed Kurisu getting killed. And then things went back and the timelines were changed from him accessing the phone outside and changing the timelines. Just by random coinciding, it's happened where he basically moved to a world line where she wasn't killed. And the satellite experiment was different, is what happened. He transported from one world line to another world line. The idea of Okarin transferring to a different world line, we're going to talk about here in a second. I feel like something bad is going to happen in this world line. Someone's going to die. And he's going to try to move to a different world line where that doesn't happen and try to prevent it from happening in that world line. But we're going to talk about that here in a second. Because when the dad pulled up, I was like, I thought he wasn't going to slow down fast enough and was going to hit his daughter, is what I legit thought about. And that sounds horrible, but I was like, just the ominousness of that scene made me think of that. I'm like, is he going to hit his daughter? Is this going to happen? I think it's going to happen. I think something bad is going to happen to either a minor character like the daughter or to someone that's major like Mayuri, like what happened to Kurisu at the beginning of this series. Something is going to happen that's going to really hurt them or kill them. And Okarin is going to try, like a mad scientist, to use Steins Gate to go to a different world line and prevent it from happening. But that's not going to be possible because of what I'm about to tell you all. So anyway, I know I'm waiting till last minute, but I want to wait till the end of this discussion to talk about it. And so I am a little bit concerned that Braun thinks that Okarin can't be alone with his daughter. I'm like, Okarin is delusional and many things, but a child predator I don't think is one of them. So I was like, I felt really bad for Okarin in this part where it's like, a guy like you couldn't control himself if left alone with my daughter. I'm like, Okarin is like the most sexless thing here. Daru's the one you should probably be worried about, but even he wouldn't bother her. So I'm like, I felt bad for Okarin in this moment because I was like, oh, 2011, you were a different time. And he's like, do you always think about me like that? Like, yeah. I'm like, Okarin is many things, but that's not it. Now, granted, because of what I'm about to tell you all about this whole chaos theory back here, could the Okarin of this world line that was in this world line be someone who would be like that with Nye? We don't know. We don't know. But I don't think so. I really don't think so. So he goes in there, and then he's like, goes back upstairs. And I love the scene where he's texting the giant email to John Titor. I love the composition of this scene. I love that he sends everybody's home. He sends everybody's home, but after sending everyone home, Kurisu stays behind and is on the couch in the shadows. Like, there is a little bit of like a devilish aspect to her character in this series, just like a little wee bit. She's not even, doesn't seem to even be aware of it. And maybe it's Amane not trusting her that lends me to think that as well. But I love the composition of this scene where the light is shining in from the window and Okarin is in the box of light as he's trying to text Titor and find the truth, which when the Messiah thing comes up and he's in the box of light, it's so intentional. But then Kurisu's in the shadows, right? So fascinating. He's like, well, you'd be all alone back at the hotel, so is that why you're staying behind cell 7? She's like, don't call me that. If you want to stay here, be quiet to the zombie. And she's like, I hate that nickname even more. Which, yeah, that nickname's because she died in a world line, and he's the only one that remembers it. So he sends this text message. They don't let us know what all is in this text message, but if you could read Japanese, you could tell what it was, I'm sure. Comment down below. But he's like, do you want my attention that much? He's like, I sent the message to John Titor. So then several text messages come back. One is from, he gets several texts at once, and he's confused at first. But he checks the one that says, Rukaku, I'm really sorry about the lottery. I feel for Ruka. I was like, oh, they feel so bad that they didn't get him the lottery ticket. And he's like, oh, that's all right. And he kind of smiles at that. He's like, you're thinking of me, you know. Then the next text message is from Moika. And that one says, next time, tell me about the time machine. It's a promise. Okay, I promise, right? Bye. And the subject line is, I had fun. So maybe Moika is totally innocent and a total red herring and just a weirdo that would rather speak through text. And that doesn't make... I say weirdo not because they choose to speak through text, because I know some people would rather do that. That's not what I'm saying. It's weird because Okarin has gave them very specific visual and verbal cues of them being like, no, you can't have the IBM machine. No, I'm not going to tell you about this. But Moika seems to completely ignore everything that is said to her. And that's just kind of like, okay, they're very aggressive. And then John Titor. Well, Daru calls. And Daru said they left the wallet at the lab, so I can't get into the May Queen. So I feel like we should note this because it may come up later, is that Daru left the wallet. Will this come up in a future episode? Anything's possible in this series. I don't trust it to not happen. And then Mayuri calls on Daru's behalf and is like, are you hanging out with Daru? And they had you call. Is that it? So they're at the park. He's like, you don't need to lend him money, okay? And so Daru's just sitting there fanning themselves. And I like Ruka. So basically Ruka and Mayuri and all them hanging out, I'm sure is akin to all this. Also, the way that they're hanging out, I'm just going to point this out. Because this is all going to, the rule of 3 in this. The way that they're standing is like a triangle. You had Mayuri at the top. You've got Ruka at the bottom. You've got Daru at the end of the... I don't know if that's significant in any way, shape, or form, but in this series, we have to note it because it might be significant down the road. So yeah, I like Mayuri was concerned about Okarin. If you don't hug my Upa doll, okay? And he's like, thanks. And then, of course, you know, I love Okarin smiling at Mayuri. Like, I don't think Okarin romantically likes Mayuri, but I think she's like a little sister to him, and he really loves her, like, as a platonic sibling love. And then he gets frustrated when, you know, Kurisu notes it. He's like, leave me alone. So then John Titor gets back to him, right? And by this point, it's like 6:30 p.m. The past was changed. The world line moved. The one thing I don't understand is how you can retain all your memories. But something, apparently this whole email time travel thing was not even something that in 2036 it was concocted. So, Now the question is, who is John Titor? My theory, I think now might even be that John Titor, based on the voice and everything we've got, we might be getting catfished. What if Amane is John Titor? What if Amane is John Titor and is just using a fake voice to fool all of us? We don't know. We don't know. Because maybe that's how they're finding all their information about that Okarin's been confirming with them. Now, they do make the point of saying you changed the past and moved a world line. It's never been confirmed that anyone who exists can maintain their memories over a world line jump to observe the change. And then we cut to Moika. So is Moika someone that has done this and is now freaked out about it? And that's why they don't talk. That's why they avoid photos. That's why they're keeping track of everything, because they're kind of freaked out about it. If that's the case, then I'm sorry I called her a weirdo. That would make sense. You may have that power. And of course, telling someone that thinks they're the main character of the story that they may have that power to go beyond Divergence 1%. Is that a thing, or is that just a thing for this series? Is that a thing? I don't think it... I think it just is meaning something with Steins Gate, so we're not going to research into that. We're not going to get noting into that. Nope. No spoilers. No spoilers. So it's something to do with Steins Gate alone. And it's called Divergence 1%. Okay. So Divergence beyond, you are able to go beyond Divergence 1%. And he's like, what does that mean? Lead the world. And Kurisu's like, excuse me, someone's texting you all this? What lies beyond Divergence 1%? What happens then? And so he sends the message to find out. Also, full battery. Good for that flip phone. That flip phone getting full battery, y'all. They don't make them like that anymore. And so they sit there waiting in the darkness as he emails back and says, what lies beyond is true freedom. If you can't cross that barrier, the future will become a dystopia. So apparently true freedom is past Divergence of 1%. And if you can't get there, then you're going to face a dystopia. This sounds more and more like Amane, because Amane seems like they come from that dystopia. So are they trying to get Okarin to push past the Divergence 1% so that they can avoid their own future? My goal is to change the future, which we're going to talk about. And you may be the one who has that power. And he's like, what's wrong? Because he slams the phone down. What is he talking about? Me change the future. And then the phone goes off like crazy amounts saying, I want... What is he? He's like, I want... Oh, I just get too close to the end there. Because it kept going off. And Okarin's like, I don't need that much power. I don't need that much power to change the future. I just want to do a mad scientist experiment. That's all. Future technology labs. Not anything. Future gadget labs. Kyoma. I want you to be the Messiah. Ooh! Okay. So, now, look. The I want you to be a Messiah, that sounds more like something that Amane would say, or that a love interest would say, like Moika, than something that is, you know, from John Titor, but I don't know. So, and that's where the episode ends. What's interesting is Okarin is very much all talk, I feel, when it comes to him being like, oh yeah, I'll be the Messiah, all of this. He wants to be all talk. But then when it actually comes down to it legit happening, he's like, oh, never mind. No, we don't need that. We don't need that. No. So, you have been wondering this entire time, pray tell. I feel as if this whole idea of changing the future is not possible. Or at least not possible in the sense that they are thinking of right now. Because of chaos theory. And because of this thing called the butterfly attractor. Y'all, Whiteboard Coon and I, we have some things to share with you. So let's back this up. We're going to move Whiteboard Coon over here a little bit so we can get into this, right? So here is the beyond crazy circumstance of me even telling you about this, because this has nothing to do with a Steins Gate comment. Moomin, who I told you all at the beginning of this episode in the intro, Moomin had commented on episode 1 of Orb on the movements of the Earth, which I just happened to check that comment today before recording this. I was checking that comment. They're catching up with the series. They left a comment for episode 1, like, again, 5 days ago, which gives me chills on my skin. Maybe it was 6 days ago, so it's not as relevant, but I was like, whoo. So they left this comment like 5 or 6 days ago, and I'm just now getting to it and catching up with it. So I looked at the comment, and Orb on the movements of the Earth doesn't really have anything to do with this, but it kind of does, so I understand why they commented about it. But the moment I read this, I was like, and the moment I watched the video about it, I was thinking, this is Steins Gate. Oh my God, I need to talk about it in Steins Gate, because it seems like something that would come up with time travel and butterfly effect and things like that. Little did I know, as this episode is going on, my head is like exploding because I'm like, oh my God, the chaos theory video. So the world has let these stars align, y'all. But let me explain this. So there's a video that was sent. If you go to Orb on the Movements of the Earth, episode 1 on Patreon, you will see Moomin's comment that will have the link to this video. You can go watch it. I'm transcribing basically what has been said about it. So my source, if I want to go back and tell you all my source, so you can go look this up yourself. The source of said video is from Simon Clark, What Everyone Misses About Chaos Theory. So look up Simon Clark on YouTube, What Everyone Misses About Chaos Theory, and you'll find this video. But what they talk about is this thing called the butterfly attractor. And it kind of looks like a set of butterfly wings. It kind of looks like an affinity symbol, but it gets bigger and bigger, and it's kind of a little bit perpendicular, right? So it looks kind of like that. It is a part of chaos theory. And what Simon Clark breaks down is this concept of there are 3 simple equations. Now, as someone that's an English major, this all looks like doodle bob squiggles to me. But it's like dx over dt equals this little, not an O, but an O, and then in parentheses, y minus x. Then you have dy over dt equals px minus xz minus y, then dz over dt equals xy, and then like the beta sign or something, and then over z times z. I can't explain it to you, but they didn't focus on the formulas. What they did say was that they are simple equations, mind you, of the Earth's atmosphere. Where the rule of 3 comes in is that there are 3 variables in all of these equations. There's x, y, and he said z, x, y, and z instead of x, y, and z. We're going to go with Z, X, Y, and Z. And so these 3 variables evolve over time, right? Which makes sense. The atmosphere of the Earth evolves over time, right? So in this, X, Y, and Z represent physical quantities in the atmosphere. With me? So a point, they represent a point in 3D space. A point, the X, Y, and Z variables. So if you look in axes, there's an X, there's a Y, there's a Z or Z, and they represent a point in 3-dimensional space. So they specify coordinates within that space, X, Y, and Z. Here's the thing. As time moves, the atmosphere evolves, and the point moves in this 3-dimensional space. So it creates what looks like what's interesting that they note is that it doesn't just free fall, like free go everywhere in space. It does stay within a constrained point between a set of constrained points. And so they start to look like butterfly wings, the way that they kind of move in and out of that constraint, right? But this is where it gets crazy. Even a tiny variance with any of the 3 variables, the tiniest of variances, will produce very different results. every time. I was thinking as I was listening to this video, I was like, are the three variables Okarin, Mayuri, and Kurisu? Because from episode 1, those are the three things that seem like they would be variables of changing a world line. What Kurisu does, what Okarin does, and what Mayuri does. Because in episode 1, Mayuri was the one that, because of her losing the Upa, the metal Upa, because of her getting the metal Upa, because of all this, it played a factor in determining what floor she was on, what floor they were on, which determined like when the satellite hit and things went down. And then Kurisu getting stabbed, but then in another world line, they're not stabbed. That seems relevant. And then Okarin is the one that can kind of mitigate and migrate between the world lines. Those three seem like the most likely to be variables that impact the world line. And Amane has recognized Kurisu as potentially being different in one world line than another. So, and they all seem, Moika, Amane, everyone seems to interact with Mayuri in a certain way. It just makes it feel like they all three are points that have purpose in the world lines, right? So yeah, so there's that. But this is the part that is crazy to me. The lines in this model, and what blew my mind when I was listening to Simon Clark's video, is that the lines in the model, even though they look like it, as I've drawn it, never cross. They will never cross. Because it looks like they are, because you're projecting a 3D image in a 2D space. Because 2D is just this. There's no dimension that I can draw and do that. And I was like, oh my God. So equations will run forever and never cross. They will never be the same. There are an infinite number of equations from the variables. It will never end, and they will never be the same as one another. So it said that you might get close, like with the lottery numbers. You might get close to getting that lottery number, but you're not going to get the exact one. There's one number off, right? And if you look at this, there are probably hundreds of world lines where one number is off in each of these lottery tickets. One number's off, but it's never the perfect lottery number. So anyway, you can never perfectly predict what the future will look like. Because if you alter 1 microsecond of time, different world line. If you alter one thing, different world line. If you change one factor of the variable in one sense of the word, different world line. They're never going to be the same. So the idea of changing the past to predict a new future is theoretically, through that theory, not possible. Because once you change the past, you've already created a new world line that is not the world line you were once in. And it will have a very different outcome and a very different future. So, tiny differences will eventually have massive divergences. Which, if you think about this series so far, tiny little differences. The fact that the Dr. Pepper, from the beginning, the fact of Okarin and his encounter with Kurisu. Think of how his relation with Kurisu is now compared to episode 1. It snowballs. Snowballs, right? And the future is nothing like it was previously observed. So, chaos theory, as Simon Clark explains it, is based on systems that are deterministic. There is no randomness. It is sensitive dependence on initial conditions, but the results never intersect. You can never have the exact same atmosphere ever again. And it was kind of a beautiful video because the goal at the end of the video is to say that how we are existing in the world right now and every moment that we are living right now can never be repeated, and it will never be the same for anyone ever again. So your life experience is unique and is your own. And I'm like, that's beautiful and amazing. But I was sitting there the whole time being like, Steins Gate! So mathematically, every single moment in time is unique. So relating to this episode, is insanity. And so I don't know if Okarin and them are going to realize this, that John Teeter's theory about changing the future by changing the past, I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's possible. I think they're just going to keep making more world lines. And Okarin's just going to keep traveling to new world lines. But he's not going to change the future because you can't. Okay. I have a slight headache. I was hoping that the caffeine from, as soon as this episode was over, I had a slight headache and I was hoping the caffeine from the Dr. Pepper would help, but it is not. So your homegirl's probably gonna have to take some headache medicine. But what a wild episode, right? What a wild episode. I've talked over an hour about this. So making up for lost time last week. Making up for lost time, y'all. I'm so excited. This series makes me so happy and also makes my brain hurt. So, but hurt in a good way. Hurt in that I feel like I've learned things. I feel like I've learned more watching this series than I have in the last 6 months of just random things. So oh my God, this is awesome. I love it. But anyway, I'm excited to hear your thoughts down below. Spoiler tag if they're spoiling. If I'm predicting the future like Okarin, if I'm using my psychic powers, you just spoiler tag that shit. But I'm so excited, y'all. Oh my God. You all have no idea. So anyway, next week's episode 8, the rule of 8, I don't think will apply to this series because it's the season's 25 episodes at least, I think. But 8's my lucky number. So, and infinity. So we'll see. We'll see with episode 8. We'll just see. So, anyway, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. I'm going to go finish this Dr. Pepper, and I'll see you all next week with another episode of Steins Gate. Bye.